So we like to switch it up here at Who's Got My Money. So whatever you guys are seeing, Mr. Eric, if you could come join us on stage, please. We like to switch it up. So we like to do a choose your own adventure type situation, you know, where we'll let you guys vote on what you guys want to hear today, blah, blah, blah. So we keep it fresh, different angles, different perspectives. We're actually going to start here with my partner, Mr. Eric Harris. We work on 2 projects together very briefly. You guys have probably been out to the Venture House, which is one of several properties we own, 10-bedroom properties we have dedicated to entrepreneurship. We host monthly events here in Vegas and soon to be other cities, Scottsdale, Salt Lake, Miami, where we foster entrepreneurship, investment, and impact. He's also my partner on the communities that we're actually doing at these events, like Built By and several others. Between him and I would probably field 300 pitches a week, something like that. So we've collectively seen like 20,000 pitches between the 2 of us. And so he's going to share real briefly. I'm going to hand him the microphone a little bit this morning, real quick, about some things and some updates and whatever, and just some perspectives as a guy that's a founder, becoming an angel investor, etc., etc. And then I will take it from there. So, Mr. Eric Harris.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to do something really quick and say the importance of what you're doing right now. Don't miss the moment for the moment. It's something that happens as a founder, someone that's you're type A or whatever, you're trying to go out there and do something, and oftentimes you don't wake up and smell coffee or smell roses, whatever. It's important to recognize where you are. It's a journey. There isn't a destination. It's just a journey. Even if you go out and you actually sell a company, you exit, you're in another stage of your journey. Never look at it as a destination. It's just a journey with a bunch of milestones along the way. And the reason why that's important is the value that you get out of where you are now will help propel you to where you're trying to go. There's a book that says what got you here won't get you there. It's really important. I would recommend you go read it, because oftentimes we try to take what got us where we are into where we need to go, and you have to shift. So being in the moment and understanding where you are in the moment is hugely important. These talks are valuable. Understanding community is hugely valuable. It's important. Partnerships, how to leverage people that are around you, not for what you can get from them, but what you can get with them. Those are really important. And I know I'm slightly in a rush because I'm in between 2 different things, but I came to Vegas about 2.5, 3 months ago, like in person. And since then, just making the right connections, working with the right people, having a great partner, like the amounts of, like, it's phenomenal what can happen when you connect with the right people and you're genuine in who you are. Like even working with Z, like it's genuine who you are. So I want to say that because it's more about being the human side of it that we often miss. And I've had conversations with people this week where they've lost deals, they've had agreements go wrong, and it's because they're after something and they're missing the human piece of it. And so that's the piece that I want to leave in with y'all today is stay human, stay connected. There's a lot of stuff happening, but if you're in the moment, that's the thing that's really going to last. It's going to help you through whatever you got to deal with. So just that's what I want to share.
Awesome. We'll see you guys at the next Venture House event with Eric here on the 2nd of August, which is a Wednesday night here in Vegas, and online every single week. So come check him out.
Yeah, I will do that.
All right, guys. So I wrote a post this morning about a founder that has showed up and always asked questions. A founder that every single time she pitches, it's always fresh and interesting. She brings the energy, she brings the excitement, she brings the passion for what she's working on. And on top of that, I've watched her evolve. We talked in the past at last sessions about how if you're building a relationship with an investor, updating them on the progress shows them that you're in motion. So maybe it's not a yes, but it's just not a yes right now type of a situation. And so she has shown me that. But what's also cool is as she's gone through her fundraising journey, and she's into Rev, she also made a decision to make a pretty interesting pivot. So I want to spend some time kind of showcasing what she's working on over at Vita, because instead of doing a fundraise, which she initially was contemplating and thinking, her and her team are all in on actually being acquired. And so what's cool is she's in a position where she's very, very likely, actually, it is going to happen, where she will have an acquisition that will allow her to move to the next stage. And one last thing I'll just remind you guys, everything we do at Capto, which is the funding platform we're building, all the community stuff with Venture House and Built By, everything we do is in service of one goal, one North Star, and that is to create founder funders. We want to graduate more founder funders than anyone else on earth. And so we aggregate the best relationships with the best founders and with other funder friends that are the best at due diligence and other aspects in order to be in service to founders, to graduate them, to get them exits as quickly as possible. Why? Because when a founder exits their company, they get to make a decision, and that decision is, do I do it again, which they often do, or do I reinvest? And when I reinvest, you always tend to reinvest. Historically, the data shows we reinvest locally. So if we want Vegas to be a premier startup hub, we need to create more founder funders. It's one of the several things that we get to co-create together. So we're going to dive in today. She's got her mic on. And she's going to tell you really quick, and we're going to start by putting her on the spot, and you're going to pitch.
Perfect. Hi,
Okay.
everyone. Fun fact, my name is the only one in the world, Zilot. My name actually comes from my mom being pregnant with me 3 months, and the doctor told her to abort me because I was going to have Down syndrome. My parents went home, they talked about it, they prayed about it, and they're like, no, we're keeping our child, and here I am. And so my mom added an H to the name that usually is found in the Bible in Genesis 23. And since then, I've had some strong faith to my detriment, where I believe so much in people and in myself, I just don't take other factors in consideration. But the good news is I always see the good in humanity. And so now what we've done after 3.5 years is we're in the process of looking for an opportunity for someone that is looking to merge and or acquire the company. And for several reasons, but most importantly, I'm looking to become a mom and a wife. And so what a beautiful thing for me to move into the next stage. So the baby that I built is now going to be an actual human, right? Different struggles that I'm choosing. And so that is my desire within the next 6 months to 12 months to have that merger and or acquisition and negotiate opportunities for me to stay on thereafter, given what the acquirer will need moving forward. And I worked as a psychotherapist for a decade, for 10 years, saving marriages left and right. And I've realized now that there's so much that is in symbiotic elements between marriage and acquisitions, between relationships and mergers, right? Because sometimes relationships can go sideways, and guess what? So do acquisitions and startups and deals and investments. And so if I can spread that knowledge to help others, that's my goal, gratitude. And if I can help others specifically...
11/11, grateful moment.
Exactly, yes. I learned that from Mike, right? Like I learn and I apply. And so if I can help others understand that gap, I have done my job. Ultimately, I have one goal in my lifetime before I die, and that's to die much more healed and wounded. And I wish for you the same, and I can do that through moving through this process so that I can share my message with more people online through my books and through my speaking, and to inspire your future founders that are females, your sisters, your wives, your future generation. And so that's why I'm here, and in any way that I can receive help, I'm open.
So tell us about the business real quick. What's the problem, and how's the business been solving that? If you're willing to be open, share with us revenue numbers, figures like that, and then the decision to kind of pivot to an actual acquisition versus a fundraise, which would later lead to subsequent rounds and an acquisition at a later time.
Of course. So a little bit about the company, the Beta System. I started it in March of 2020, exactly as COVID was hitting. I noticed that there was a problem in the mental health community as providers. So as I mentioned, I worked as a therapist, a mental health provider, but I worked in the hood. I worked in the community. So what that means is that there's very little help for a larger population that is not as represented or served. And so when I was doing that, I noticed something during COVID. Raise your hand if you have insurance, health insurance. Did you know that most health insurance companies didn't pay us when COVID hit? Because it wasn't in person. And so a lot of us lost our homes, lost our security, lost everything. And so that lit something inside me, right? Because there was an injustice there, and I felt that there was something we could do. And so what I did is, I took any extra time that I had, aside from working as a psychotherapist and saving marriages and helping children understand emotions, to build a business that would have more impact. So I thought to myself, if I can only see so many patients at a time, how can I multiply this and create greater impact for my purpose that God has given me? Let's help the provider. And so I started coaching mental health and wellness professionals about what we didn't learn in business. It's common sense to some people, but to healers and helpers, it's like left field. What we know how to do is help and heal and to nurture, not necessarily how to add up numbers and see, does this make sense profit-wise, right? And so over the years, we've had some great lessons and some great triumphs. Thus far, we've had 350 paid customers at a high ticket rate, of an entry level of 3,000, 5,000, and 10,000. 3,000 is a starter. The growth stage of a therapist growing their practice perhaps has a full caseload, 5,000, and somebody who's already growing a team and expanding their impact is at a $10,000 level. What we realized is that this was refreshing, something new, something innovative during COVID because no one was really doing it. That was a woman of color that had worked in the community but also worked in private practice. So I've heard it all the way down to I can't feed my kids to he left his socks out, we're getting a divorce. So I know from here to here on SES and what is out there in the world. How does this serve me? Because as a leader, it's the most important skill I will ever have as an entrepreneur. Am I of my word? Do I provide and do I offer what I say I'm going to do? And thus far, that has led me to where I'm at. In revenue, right now, we are a little bit shy of $1 million. Now, for some of you, that may not seem like much, but for me, I came from a humble home. My parents were not documented when they came to this country. I'm first generation, and everything I heard in my home is money doesn't grow on trees. So go out there and work. And so that's what I did, and now I am doing everything I can inside my power to spread the message that it is possible. I am the first of many inside my niche, my community, whatever you may call it. But that being said, something that's very, very important to understand for the acquirement is I wanted to go to a good home, somebody that has a match specifically with the audience, with the people that we are serving. Something that I've noticed is understanding that with the partnership that we have, the difference between a relationship and a partnership is that in a relationship you are relating to somebody in some way, right? But in a partnership there are solid agreements. And the biggest problem we have right now in the startup and the investment and the raising capital world is that we don't understand, are they givers or are they takers? Do they have good boundaries? Are they of their word, of integrity and of character? And so in understanding these primary principal elements, we have a better shot at this working. And interestingly enough, as a marriage and family therapist for 10 years, they're the same thing that leads to successful marriages. Right now, unfortunately, we have the highest rate it has ever been for divorce. It's above 50%. And that's people that just won't pull the trigger and do it. Because you know you've seen it, right? They're fighting at the store, they're fighting in the car, and it's the same thing in the startup world and raising capital. There's a lot going behind the curtain, and honesty first. And so that's really what I'd like to share.
How many of you guys are enrolled by her store and would love to help her with what she's doing? Awesome. Love that. Great. So make sure that you get in touch. She's tagged in the post I wrote today on LinkedIn. And see if you can follow up and support her on what she's doing. And the kind of person she is, she's also going to be interested in what you're working on and how she can be of support to you. I've seen her do that even in the pitch sessions and stuff where she's in the chat, connecting people to other resources. Okay, so let's go through this acquisition thing. I sent you some books. You're also certainly not relying just on me as a resource. You've got your team and so walk us through kind of that process. What are you discovering? What are you finding as you're starting to zero in on the people that are worthy of a relationship that could lead to the right partnership?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I never thought this would happen, but I very much see the correlation between the courting phase in a relationship romantically, right? Or in friendship, or even in family. Family's a little vague, so let's just use the romantic relationship for this purpose. So there's this courting phase where it's, I'd like to get to know you more. Let's meet, let's see if there's a vibe, if there's something there. And it's the same thing in the raising capital world. The first meeting you have with an investor, it's like, can we do this? Like, can we vibe? And then what I've learned in the pipeline and the status of raising capital in any of its elements or form is, do we have something in alignment of shared goals? Like, is your vision something that I'm like, yes, like it's a whole body, heck, yes, right? And if it's not a whole body yes, I don't want to move forward. I've learned that enough in my own personal life, dating enough frogs to kiss the prince. I've learned that already, and so I'm applying this to raising capital. And I'll share with you all, let's all have a giggle together. This week, I had an investor that canceled the call for the third time because a smoothie spilled on her. So she didn't show to the meeting, and I held her accountable. So she asked me to book on my calendar again, and I said, absolutely not. I have grace and I have compassion, but that's not how we show up. I'm looking for a leader to match what I'm going to give you. That's step number one, boundaries and your standards and your expectations.
Okay, pause. Can you guys think about the strength of the frame in that situation, what that communicates to somebody else? Now, she's not just playing hardball. She's looking for a marriage. She's looking for someone that she can convey this baby that she's created and make sure that they're going to take it and make sure that it maturates into a teenager and an adult that's healthy, that's vibrant, that is successful, right? And so she's like, I'm choosing a partner that's going to help to parent this thing in the future. And I'm sure any of you guys can recognize this. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into a startup. And getting through this phase that she's passed through is actually the hardest phase. Getting to $1 million in revenue, which is what she's done. Especially on a subscription model, which is really attractive because it's a very quantifiable thing that can be tracked and measured, right? Which makes it easier for an investor to understand what it is they're really buying. But for her to have that strength of frame, now how many of you guys think that she's just got the strength of frame for no reason, or it's because she's prepared, she knows her stuff, she knows the audience, she knows the client set, right? So this isn't just some shallow situation, she really knows it. Something else I'll mention, guys, she recognizes that investors are giving her capital, whether it's for an acquisition or whether it's for an investment. And she understands that it's a courting process. So one of the reasons why we have become friends is because she has courted our friendship. I had an opportunity to go out to dinner last night with another founder, also mentioned in my post. This guy was very, very, very patient with my schedule. And it showed that when we finally met up, he had actually done the homework. Everything I'd asked him to look at wasn't for my own betterment. I already wrote the stuff. I knew what was in the post. But I shared them with him so that by the time we got together, our time could be more meaningful. So for example, if you get an opportunity to meet with the Tony Drexel Smith, have you taken the time to look at his website? Do you understand what they're building, which is much more than just, but in essence, it's a FICO for startups to understand where they're at in the process. How successful are they going to be in launching, operating their company, and in thinking through the due diligence elements that investors invariably have to pass through, right? I've seen so many people walk up to these authors and things and speaking things, and they say, oh, I'm a huge fan, and somehow comes up, well, have you read my book? And the answer is no. Guys, I mean, really, we can do better than this. Not knowing what the investors invest in, not knowing what they really care about. And if you don't know, that's okay, but take the time to do what we call discovery, which she mentioned, finding out what they truly care about so that you can produce a shared outcome. So in our past sessions, we've talked about this idea of sponsored capital, which is a completely different capital type than you guys are used to even thinking about. And this is where money comes in from a large corporation, Fortune 2000, private equity group, family office, and they're writing you a check for $300 to $500 grand plus, and it definitely goes up from there. It goes up in $20 million plus range, and there's no equity and there's no debt. There's no equity, there's no debt, so it effectively it's coming into the company as revenue. Now, there's never anything for nothing. There's always a reason why somebody does something. And you're one relationship away from getting your company completely capitalized, sponsored, backed, supported, or acquired. But that takes time to build those relationships. And so if you rush through that process, you're going to be missing some of the people that can become your biggest champions. There's going to be people that she ultimately chooses not to work with that might be the person that brings her to the person. Right? Because guess what? Investors always invest together. So let's dig into this acquisition process here real quick. What have you been learning? Any kind of bullet points? Anything that is kind of started to clarify what your go-to market is for this? Because this is a pivot. I mean, for a minute you were thinking traditional raise, and now you're like, no, I want to be acquired. I'll stay on for a little bit, but I want to be able to exit this business, which then opens up the future as you get your family started. Else. When you exit, you're exponentially more likely to exit again, which is the reason why we're obsessed with founder funders exiting and doing it multiple times. The average exit takes 11 years. I would like to compress that down to 4 or 5 years. And what we've even seen is with the right support, the right network effect, the right venture ecosystem, which we're building here behind the scenes, myself and Tony and several others. Tony opens up his home. I call Tony and I say, hey, I'm bringing 20 European founders over to your house. He's like, great, we're making tacos. And we invited all our friends over. Tuesday done. Hey, you gotta do it. Steaks, we just did steaks. So that's the kind of thing that helps to bring together and support and create these things. And so you can either choose to understand how you can be an important part of an ecosystem where you're the recipient of resources. There's 5 major groups that can endow a founder with what they need in a given community. It's important for you to know what those 5 things are. This has come from me studying. This has come from me following the money, figuring out where the capital is. No matter what country we're talking about, I'm studying Saudi Arabia right now. The municipalities, the universities, the venture capital and angel, which is what all you guys chase after, but it is the smallest pool of liquidity available. It's 3% of the available money out there. You've also got the private equity groups. That's one of the groups that's most likely to write you a sponsored capital check because they're probably in the legacy stage of their life, and they're at one time were a founder. So they know what you're going through, and it's a single check writer decision. And then the community builders. If you become an important part of the fabric of community, or one of these 5 situations, and I'm talking about the university as it relates to startups, the community of municipality leaders or government or state leaders that are actually involved with venture, what happens is these are the people that make decisions where resources go that's not private enterprise. And if you're somebody that has a relationship with them, who do you think they're going to call when they decide to allocate capital? Is it going to be you? Are you doing anything to add value? And by the way, the currency the government understands is jobs. Is what you're doing producing jobs and making them look good somehow, some way? That's how you get in good with the government. Okay, so back to what we're saying on this acquisition thing.
Yeah.
Highlights.
So the most important thing that I have found is negotiation, 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 right? And there's this book, it's called Never Split the Difference. And I've been applying a lot of what I learned in that book, right?
Yes, here.
Yeah? Well, let me know. It's
I'll
good
get you
one.
introduced.
And so I read this other really great book, and it's Negotiating as a Woman. And it's from one of my mentors that I took her program 3 years ago at USC in Southern California. And here's what I learned, and it's a primary principle, but most people fail to do this, which is 80% of the negotiation is preparation. Preparing for it much more in advance. Clear communication. What do you want? What are your wants? What are your needs? And how do we get there? And that's literally been like the biggest hurdle that we've had over time, but I believe in my emotional maturity, but also my ability to effectively communicate what it is that I want versus what I need. It's made it much easier. So I literally just straight up say, with your permission, may I share? Like, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I want, here's what I need, can you deliver? Okay, you can deliver. Let's bring out receipts, due diligence, right? And then let's show character. What would happen if blank situation happens? Let's just go for it, let's talk openly. It's the same thing that I noticed that failed relationships didn't have. None of them talked about, well, what happens if we have a special needs child? What happens if my mama lives next door? Nobody talked about that, and it's the same thing I'm learning and I'm applying. So the beauty of this is, I was trained as a healer, and I was trained to save marriages and kids and everybody's emotional health, but really, I think my impact is huge, where I can apply this anywhere now, in business, raising capital, entrepreneurship, leadership, anything really.
Do you guys see how important the soft skills are? You see how when I say in a post that we're buying you as a founder more than anything else, it's because we're betting on the jockey, not the horse. There's a Vegas founder that's very, very quiet, pretty much doesn't leave the house. I can barely get this person to do just about anything to leave the house at all. But this is the type of person, if this person shows up in a meeting, you better believe that they're going to know more than you do about the current situation. That's how prepared they are. That's the reason they don't leave the house much. So they might be sitting in a negotiation and they say, I'm sorry, we can't move forward. And this person slides a piece of paper across and says, this says that you're breaking the law, and it just so happens to be that my app solves that problem for you. Can you imagine the power of that? Can you imagine the frame? And there's no argument, there's no ego. It's just literally like, let me introduce you to a problem you have, and let me let you know that I also have the solution. Pretty amazing. Requires huge amounts of due diligence, huge amounts of learning because of the level at which they're playing. And I believe, based on my extensive experience, this person will end up with a multi-high 8-figure initial funding to do what they're doing. 2 years of preparation to come to that moment. So ask yourself if you believe in what you're doing enough to quietly build without fanfare something like that. And it's required this person to become a complete and total student on all sorts of stuff. And yes, they're a minority. And so extra contingencies to make sure that they can drive this and really get it home. Really quick before we move on, do you guys have any questions for Z? Anybody have some quick questions for Z? Or you can get with her. Okay, go ahead, Josh.
So since you've been thinking about a pivot here, if you can't find someone that would be a good acquirer, would you look at just having some of your existing team or external team sort of manage the enterprise and keep it going? Or is there a reason why that looks unattractive?
Am might be an opportunity. I'm open.
What's cool also is Z's got a very clear purpose for what she sees as the next chapter in her life. I think we all know she's going to continue to do business stuff and whatever, but she does know that the next stage needs to include the environment of a family and those opportunities as a priority. Sammy.
Question. So for the potential investor looking to acquire, what's the benefit to buying a business at the stage that you have it at versus trying to start from scratch?
Yeah, great question. I would believe it's two things. Oddly enough, because I am the brand, I'm part of the deal, and so is our community. The community is involved.
Yeah, so Tony and I can speak to this big time. Most of the time, groups love to acquire businesses that are on a subscription that are just approaching or passing that $1 million, $2 million mark. There's entire companies that have built their entire company around finding businesses like Z. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, my question is is your organization touched down in Las Vegas? And is like a way for us to communicate like the locals in Vegas?
We're online.
All online.
We're online, yeah. We have networking events throughout. We're in 35 states.
Can you explain to people why you made the pretty dramatic decision to move to Vegas from LA?
I mean, besides this amazing crowd of people. Opportunity. You know what's funny? For the longest time I sat there. My sister lives here. She's lived here for 30 years. And I was just sitting at dinner and she made me soup and she's like, what's up? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what's Vegas? And she gave me a whole list. Like, it's entertainment, it's an adult Disneyland, all this stuff. And then later at night I was like, boom, I know what this is. Vegas is a magnet. Why should I chase? I attract. And that's Vegas. We attract. Right?
Best host city in the world. Jason, real quick.
What is the organization, your ideal organization to acquire?
It's two people. It's either who I was 3 years ago that doesn't want to jump through all those learning lessons and values what we have and it makes sense for their investment, or it's someone who has already been through the journey of what I'm going through and has that last one in them that has the time, the availability, and the passion to say, I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to see this through.
Okay, so not necessarily a larger organization to acquire you, but more someone who's looking for a turnkey business. Cool, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, last question. Go for it.
Little due diligence, considering it's a community, what's the valuation multiple? What's your exit multiple?
With my exit evaluation, we're still doing evaluations and due diligence, but the last I had was like 1.5.
Awesome. Okay. Guys, everybody Z for the Vita. And we look forward to hearing about her acquisition here shortly. It'll come quick. All right. Yes, absolutely. Can you pass this mic to Tony, please?
Yeah, he needs to.
Okay, Josh, is now a good time?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Josh. Hello, everyone.
This is my buddy Josh, and I just want to say there are people that talk about community and they talk about getting involved and using the skill sets that they have to actually help the community. But Josh is one of the guys that actually does it. With his time, with his money, with his energy, with his connections. And what's cool is, as funders, you can almost bet that if I stroke you a check for $500,000, you're going to spend it on one of two things if you're a tech company. Talent, which is pretty much everybody, and software development. And that's what this guy does. So I'm really excited about what he's doing at Project 1000. I'd like it to be Project 10,000, but we'll get there. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about all that.
So Kurt likes to talk about what's it like to get money from investors, how do you get there? I help folks that are not investable or almost investable become investable. There's a launch party today for CutNet. CutNet is a haircut app, and it's a pretty simple concept. The founder was stuck. He needed to raise money to build a platform, and then use the platform to get some users, and then maybe get some more money, and maybe, okay, grow. My company, Big TB, we've been working on Project 1000 for about 3 years now. And it started off as Project 20. We're going to do 20 startups in 20 months. Now we're trying to do 1,000 because we got to 40. And we're like, well, we like this. We should keep doing it. So, when you think about ways to start growing your business and your product, a lot of times you don't need to raise a ton of money if you have a relatively simple product. And a lot of times, most of the businesses that are doing pretty well, they're two-sided marketplaces. They're relatively easy to build. And so, if you're looking for a quick way to, looking for a good partner, Big TB is good with that.
But when you're thinking about sort of the tying into the sponsored capital Kurt likes to talk about, this is a way, so Big TB has some projects, big projects we work on that we're not going to make money on for a long time. But it's really cool tech and we're nerds and so we play with tech. But this is a way of us, if we get a couple of bucks along the way with this Project 1000, we're really doing a lot of projects. Some of them we make more on than others. So we've got now money, how we pay our bills now, our later money, right? That's the big exit, the big whatever, and then the along the way money. So we're trying to make our along the way money helping other people get towards their goals. So anyway, anybody have a quick question? I said I had 3 minutes, so I'm ready one for any questions.
Anybody got a question about the process? What kind of tech do you like to build?
Anything. I've done video streaming sites, I've done crypto projects. In high school I was playing with computer controlled lasers. If there's anything that you can plug a computer into. So for example, real quick, one of the projects that I'm working on with somebody who's presenting at the AI group right now is for autistic children. I have a very heavily disabled daughter who's nonverbal autistic, and what this app does is it reads facial expressions and prompts phrases that can be vocalized, so parents don't need $4,000 devices so that the kid can talk. It's at ainsleychat.com and it's free. So,
Go for it.
Congrats on all the new companies. Pretty familiar with the model. What's the stake, like equity stake, what you guys take on the deal for every company?
right, so the question is, what's our take? The answer is it depends on the deal. I usually like to get at least a couple of bucks and then some equity, some rev share. On some of our projects, we'll get a percentage of revenue. On other projects, it's really, and it's also partially based off of how busy our schedule is and how much work the thing is. I'm at the point in my career where I've been developing for more than 20 years. I build things very quickly. Something might only take me 4 to 6 hours. So if someone says, yes, it's an enormous amount of work, but I've got some time, I like the project, I want to see where it's going, I think they can actually grow. Like Ivan at the launch party, I adore him. I spent a lot of time talking to him. He does stupid things, which is what he's going to do. And then I talk through him, and then he makes smarter decisions, and he follows up, and I really adore that about him. I can work with that. Just a little bit of context, I've bootstrapped a multi-million-dollar company by putting $1,000 on a credit card, and I have that tattooed on my left shoulder. I love startups. I've done that from scratch up to about a few $1 million. So that's sort of our sweet spot now. I'm trying to become a billionaire making millionaires. Since I don't know how to become a billionaire, I figured maybe that's the way.
One of the ways. Real quick.
Oh,
We got to move on, guys. So quick.
Is there anything in particular you're looking for when you're working with these companies?
folks that have their marketing figured out. I'll be the nerd. If you know your industry better than us, we'll have a better chance of succeeding. I'll know the tech better than anyone else in your space. And so if you have a community already, if you have something figured out that is, you know, for example, with the haircut app, they already have barbers figured out. They already understand the space. So if we give them tech, they're ready to go. They had, within 1 week of launch, they had 9 stylists on. And if you go to the website now, they have about a dozen services offered. So they're able to get going. That gets us excited because we're like, okay, we'll put some more time into it, right? Maybe we do the 10-hour version of it.
And for those of you guys that think you have your marketing figured out, I'm skeptical. Always. That's one of the things I've noticed that folks just really struggle with in startups is figuring out how they're going to acquire customers. And if you don't know how to acquire a customer, capital will not help you because you're just putting money into something that doesn't generate more capital. You don't have a capital problem, you have a customer problem. So, you know, the answer is like, well, should I go out and sell and get revenue? The answer is always yes. You know, especially ahead of capital if you can, or at least, you know, we talk about this idea of 100 first tries. I can always tell, and Tony definitely can tell, since he's the due diligence king, if somebody's actually talked to 100 customers and clients, because there are things you learn in that process. So if you're going to pitch, I think you need to have talked to 100 real, not your mother, talk to 100 real clients. It'll teach you what your pricing is, teach you what your offer needs to be. It'll teach you what the concerns are. You start to speak in the voice. You can relate the problem to them where they're like, oh my gosh, this person understands my problem so well. Here's my credit card, right? And that is something that's really important, especially if you get on the phone with an investor and they start pushing back. So I'm a VC. I had another VC on the phone with me talking about one of the things that we're building, and he started pushing back on me on a few things. But he was inside of one of my areas of expertise, credit-based funding. He's like, you can't fund pre-revenue startups. I'm like, done it thousands of times. Yes, you can. And I walked him through the whole process. And he was like, oh, Oh, he's back on his heels. Understood very much how to get those clients and customers, what they think, what their names are, how much they make, how many cars they have in the garage, like deeply, 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 deeply understand the avatar. Okay, how many of you guys would like to understand due diligence at a level where you could skip the 17 years that it's taken Tony to get to where he is now? And functionally, let's talk about more practically, what does that actually mean? Tell me what investors are thinking and what they're concerned about. Because there's two brains inside of every investor. The excited one, oh, I can't wait to give money to this founder. And the one that's like, oh no, I might lose my capital. I might lose my capital. So this is Mr. Tony Drexel Smith with Capizate. I believe you've got a rebrand coming here soon. He's going to give you a little bit of background on who he is and what he's building. And then we're going to get into the basics and the weeds on how due diligence works. His client is the person that you want to get capital from. That's who calls Tony. He's the one that gets the call from somebody that says, and this is a real example, hey, I'm about to put $25 million into a Vegas company. What do you think? I need you to do the voodoo that you do. Tony Drexel Smith.
Well, good morning or afternoon. It's a great pleasure to meet all of you. Quick story for you. 35 years ago, I joined the United States Marine Corps. I was very fortunate that upon joining the Marine Corps, I ended up getting into a really cool job in the Marine Corps of building special weapons and bombs. When I joined the Marine Corps, the F-18 was a brand new aircraft, so I went through an F-18 training program on how to build every weapon the F-18 can deploy. It took 2 years to get through all that training. Exactly 35 years ago this month, I was assigned to my first unit that had 120 F-18s in it. And 2 weeks later, Iraq attacked Kuwait. So I ended up on an airplane to Saudi Arabia, then United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and ended up loading F-18s for the next 8 months of my life. The coolest thing that happened, though, during that 8 months was that I got to learn a software system called Lotus 123, which today is Excel. But what happened was the commanding officer of our unit...
Lotus was acquired.
By,
Yep.
So my commanding officer looked at these 6 Marines that were all college educated and said, which one of you knows what Lotus 123 is? None of us knew. None of us had seen a laptop before either. So imagine a compact laptop, one of those really thick ones that you can drop and still works. And I got that assignment. So not only was I building weapons, but I had to make an inventory of every weapon we had, what it was designed to do, what kind of target it could take out. So when the air war started, I was the guy with the headset where the ops officers would say, we're taking out a building, but we can only kill one person in one apartment. Or, hey, we're taking out this bridge, but we're going to have to rebuild this bridge, so we only want one pillar taken out. Or, hey, we're about to do a cluster bomb attack with 12 cluster bombs on 12 aircraft at one time and take out a lot of people, but we don't want to kill any civilians. So I was the guy that had to figure all that out on Excel. So when I went back to civilian life and went to college, I shifted my college degree from history to business finance. And the reason for that is because I became an Excel whiz kid and learned real quickly as an entrepreneur. You're very young. I was 23 years old. I bought my first restaurant. So I was that guy, like Z-Lot right now is looking to sell her business. I figured out real quick there'd be no reason to start a restaurant from scratch. Why don't I buy an existing restaurant that's successful and profitable so I don't go through the 25 years of pain that the person that went through that I bought the restaurant from. So I bought this restaurant, very successful restaurant. It was a French restaurant. It was in magazines. It was a named and known place. And I started running it at 23 years old, right? And all of a sudden, I get this letter from the city that says, hey, guess what? Next year, January 1st, 1994, you can no longer smoke in a restaurant. And oh, by the way, we have a new rule that if you do any construction to your restaurant, you have to add a grease trap. So I went to get a loan. I'm thinking I'm smart, college educated. I'm a veteran of foreign wars. I'm a good guy. I'm a dad. Yeah, the bank could care less. The bank could absolutely care less. I needed 2 years of tax returns, 2 years of financial statements. I had to prove my worth to the bank. And ultimately, Wells Fargo said no. They said, go down to the SBA office, see if they'll guarantee a loan. I go to the SBA. The SBA is like, the bank already turned you down. You're not going to get a loan. That's just how this works. So I ended up having to figure out real quick, 29 years ago, how do you finance a business if the bank says no? And that's all I've been doing ever since. I ended up selling that restaurant in 1995 because I had 3 people come to me to say, how did you finance your restaurant? Because we heard it didn't work through the bank. And I said, I found alternative ways. Show me. That became my business. I've now met 11,000 entrepreneurs since 1995. And I built a practice for the first 15 years of my career was serving entrepreneurs because that was my passion. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to support entrepreneurs. I know what it's like when you can't pay the mortgage. I know what it's like when you got to pay the babysitter while you're running your business, but the lights need to be paid at the house and the restaurant, and I can't figure out which one to pay. I mean, I know what that feels like, and it is highly stressful. So for 15 years, I served entrepreneurs. But what I realized was, unfortunately, many of them have no money. They're startups, or they're early stage, or they're distressed, or they have a problem. And my passionate heart wants to help them. The Marine in me wants to serve the community and the world. The problem is they don't have the money. So I shifted my focus many years ago to serving the capital market because I figured if I provide the services I have to the capital market, they'll ultimately help the entrepreneur. And how much easier has that been? Oh, let me tell you. On the one side, it's great, and on the other side, it's a nightmare, right? I don't know if any of you realize this, but there's 84 ways to capitalize a business. So in 2008, I started this study. And my thesis at that time was, how many different ways is there to capitalize a business? Number 2, what kind of documentation do you need for each one of those types of capital? How do you get qualified for each one of those types of capital? And what are the consistent, standardized tools out there that I can apply so the people that in the entrepreneur world or the capital side can get matched up? And guess what? 0. I spent 3 years and a ton of money, $500,000 from 2008 to 2011, trying to figure out, is there something like GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles that accounting CPA firms use to communicate financials with the government? Is there such a thing within the venture capital world, private equity world, limited partnership world, family office world? The answer is no. So I went to UCLA, I went to USC, I went to Stanford, I went to Cal State Northridge, I went to colleges and universities all over the country because I was writing a thesis and I had a paper. I was able to get deans to sit down with me, and I was trying to figure out, what are you teaching in these MBAs about the standardization of documentation? What is a business plan, guys? What is a business plan? And I can guarantee you, if I asked all of you to hand me a business plan right now, not a single one of you has the same exact looking style, format, or standardization. It was whatever you or your consultant came up with. There's no standard. Never has been. What if we talk about valuation? Zilot brought up valuation earlier. I have completed over 1,000 valuations in my career. I am an expert court witness on business valuations. And I can tell you folks that there's 1,900 ways to value a company. Can you imagine? Wharton School of Business puts an annual list out of all the ways to value a company. And what we found over time is that you really need to find 4 methods most appropriate for that particular business. What we found after 15 years of our study is that ultimately every single capital type has a situation that matches it. And so what I created in 2018 after a 10-year study, I published a white paper. I was very fortunate. This white paper got me a lot of notoriety. I published a book. We sold 32,000 copies in the first 90 days. Right? And what that published book talks about and what that white paper talks about is my findings. Number 1, there's 334 puzzle pieces to a business. It took a decade to figure that out. It doesn't matter what industry, sector, subsector. It doesn't matter what stage of development you're in. There's 334 puzzle pieces. Now, in some cases, the puzzle pieces are NA, meaning that they fit right next to another puzzle piece really easily because it wasn't all that applicable, based on industry, sector, subsector, or stage of development. But more important, when people say why businesses fail, God knows how many seminars I've been to, how many professors I've listened to, and they all have the same list of 10 things. This is the reason why businesses fail. Wrong answer. The reason why businesses fail is because if they don't have 92.5% of those 334 puzzle pieces in place, then the business is going to fail. In fact, I know that because I did a study of 300 companies for 10 years, and I know exactly what the numbers are. And that published information, I have colleges and universities come ask me to speak on the subject because it's so cool, right? It's a completely revolutionary concept. Because one person will tell you the reason business failed because lack of leadership, lack of cash flow, lack of a good marketing plan, lack of a designated product. I mean, those are simple lists. I could come up with those lists all day, sure. But show me that a company that hit 90% of a scoring system we developed instead of 92.5% and they failed, and then compare that to the company right next to it, you're going to see that both that hit 90% probably failed. But they failed for different reasons. The fact of the matter is they were just at 90%. They were an A-. Now here's the thing. Our scoring system is both objective and subjective. It's an app on a phone. I teach people how to use it. But here's the thing. The average company that comes to us and we produce a score for them, their average score first round is 553. I'm telling you right now, you need 92.5%. They're hitting 55.3%. You get me? Major problem. So this is what's happening. Clients that hit scores of 700 and 800 think they have their act together. And they're banging their head against the wall because they can't get money raised. And the problem is they're still 200 points shy probably. That's why. It's because they're asking for the wrong type of capital to the wrong audience with the wrong paperwork.
Super, super huge.
Right? I mean, if you should be doing an SBA loan, but you're asking for VC money, that's like the opposite spectrums, right? If you need a bridge loan because you're positive that you're going to do this Reg CF and you're going to raise $1 million on Start Engine, and everyone at Start Engine told you you're amazing, everyone told you they're going to reserve the money on Start Engine to prove that they're going to make an investment in you. You just need 150 grand to get through the next 90 days. Well, guess what? That 90-day bridge loan for a Start Engine Reg CF is a very, very unlikely thing to happen.
Everything costs more and takes much longer than you think it's
Higher risk, more expensive, right? So what we did was we made this list of 84 different ways to capitalize a company. The very first thing we do when we meet a client is we have what we call situation analysis. Let's create a situation analysis. Let's look at your situation. What situation are you in? What problem are you trying to fix right now? Not only as a company to the public, but internally for yourself. And ultimately, what type of capital should you be pursuing? So we ask 11 questions. Those 11 questions give us an answer to what type of capital you need. And we make a list of the most probable to the least probable capital type for your situation. Everyone makes sense so far? Like that private, he was giving you a real world example of that family office, right? I shifted my business, as I told you 15 years ago. I went after the capital market side. I said, hey, I've built credibility. I've got a really great track record. I'm 38 years old. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've processed 103 SBA loans. I've done EB-5 packages. I became a broker-dealer. I got licensed with FINRA and the SEC. I knew how to do PPMs and Reg D 506C. So now I'm going to go to the capital market and I'm going to say, hey, family office, venture capitalist, limited partnerships, PEs, private equity, angel investment clubs, high net worth individuals, SBA lenders, commercial bankers, hard money lenders, the mob. I don't care. I just want to figure out every way to finance a company. Because ultimately, guys, when I meet with an entrepreneur and I believe in their story and they score 925 or better out of 1,000, I'm going to do everything I can to help them get funded. Now, what we have found since 2008, 15 years later, 78% of the companies that earn a score of 925 or higher end up getting funded, stay in business, and repay their lenders and investors. The other 22% that don't, sickness, illness, injury, death, divorce, and partner disputes. And that's why when I met Z, I got super excited because she has a solution for the 22%. Because I've been trying to fix that 22% forever. Because the VC world feels that for every 100 million they put into 10 companies, 1 will do great, 2 will do okay, and 7 will fail. We've been able to actually reverse that, and that's how I'm getting new VCs and Ps to hire my firm, is because of that exact swap. But man, I would love to fix the other 22%. Because I know if they hit 925, they really should succeed. I can't do a lot about death, right? We've had 7 deaths since COVID, meaning entrepreneurs that we helped get financed, they died. One guy got $4.8 million and died 8 weeks later, right? So I can't do a lot about death, but maybe the stress around family problems and issues around partnerships and all those things could have helped him. But in his case, no. He died of an aneurysm by cleaning the back porch of his house with a sprayer. Stuff happens, right? So, really critical to understand what situation are you in, what type of capital do you need, and then what documentation do you need. A Regulation A+, as an example, is the most complicated set of documents there is in North America. It's like doing an S1 filing to go public. You have a 130-page document that goes to the SEC, and the average back and forth with the SEC attorney and our attorney is 6 times. You also need a pro forma, forecast, budget, use of funds, a business valuation. You need a presentation deck. You need a full-on business plan that covers almost 130 items. That's called a Reg A+. What's the great thing about a Reg A+? You can raise $75 million. You can do any kind of advertising you want. So when that document by the SEC is approved, you could do TV, radio, magazine, social media. You could do a streaming TV show. You could do podcasting. You can do whatever you want. That's why a Reg A Plus is so freaking awesome. Let's raise $75 million, excuse me. But hey, do you have the $100,000 it takes to get all your documentation in order and have the right attorneys in place to actually file a Reg A Plus? So now you need that 100 grand. So maybe your situation, you don't have 100 grand. So Reg A Plus was great, except for you don't have 100 grand. That's why we created a fund where we go to investors and we say, hey, we have a 925 client that doesn't have 100 grand. Will you do the 100 grand? Bam. We call that the 925 fund. Sound cool? It's only cool if you hit 925 though. You got to get through what some of our people call the ring of fire, getting to the 925, right? An SBA loan. People don't understand. SBA is pretty cool. You can do SBA Veteran, SBA Express, SBA 7A. You can do an SBA 504B if it's related to equipment or a building. However, the SBA loves to take all your assets, guys, and anyone with 10% or more ownership in your business will have to sign on to have their assets put up for collateral too. So when someone comes to me and says, I'm going to do an SBA loan, they're awesome, they're great, they do startups, they do acquisition loans. Yeah, that sounds awesome until your wife says, I'm not going to allow you to put up our home for collateral. I'm not going to allow you to put up your every asset you have. And oh, by the way, I own 25% of the business. I ain't signing that document. You with me? So that's why the situation analysis is the first thing we do and why it's so critical. We got to understand the whole situation so that we can confirm what type of capital is best for you. The simplest document out there, many of you probably heard of it, is the SAFE, right? Simple Agreement for Future Equity. It's become a really popular thing. Y Combinator came up with it 7 or 8 years ago. It's a really cool document. Guess what? It's only a great document for family and friends in very early situations. It's a very specific situation document. You don't use a SAFE to go raise $1 million with people you don't know. Because guess what? First of all, investors don't like SAFEs. If they don't know you, they're not doing a SAFE. So sorry.
All documents and all times of raising capital, it goes through a cycle. We just came through a 12 to 15 year cycle of it being pro-founder, which means SAFE agreements are pro-founder. They're not pro-investor. We are now back into a period where even though the founder is the X factor in the important situation in any deal, because the founder is the one that's going to go out and produce the value in the market that everyone's happy about, we're back now to a situation where capital seems scarce. It's not scarce. There's just as much liquidity as there has ever been. It's just not moving through some of the traditional VC channels. It's moving through the groups that actually had the money in the first place that became LPs that gave the money to the VCs. VCs are glorified brokers.
Yep, pretty much.
Unless they happen to be like me and our partnership where a lot of the money we moved was our money. We created that money. That's rare though. Most VCs, they're actually putting up money that's other people's money. They're the GP, general partner. They have a limited partner that's putting up the majority of the capital. And what I'm explaining to you guys is that those people, if you take them all in aggregate, family offices, Fortune 20, Fortune 2000, and the private equity groups, they have trillions of dollars, trillions. You can't even wrap your head around how much money they have. There is no limit to it. It's unlimited. And so getting access to that, I think, is really one of the keys. But this is part of what I'm explaining is that you go through cycles where you're pro-founder, pro-funder, and we're in a pro-funder environment right now, where funders are now saying, I'm going to be stricter about what you show me. Show me traction. Show me this. Show me this. Oh, I'm not going to do a pre-seed. I'm going to wait till you're at the seed level. Right? Some of these things have changed. Continue. And I'd also love for you to give us your top demystified, things that come to mind.
So as I'm sitting here before you, quarter 2, which just ended 2 weeks ago, we had 27 companies earn a score of 925 out of 250 that applied in the second quarter. Of those 27, half of them have already raised all their capital. The other half are in the funding process right now. As I'm sitting before you, we have 7 clients on startengine.com. We have clients on wefunder.com. We have clients on Blockquate. We have clients on Dealmaker. We have clients sitting at PE offices, VC offices, family offices. Family offices are my very favorite because they love to hire a firm like us because they don't want to have to justify hiring internal people. They love to make it external. My whole pitch when I go meet with the family offices, if you're worth between 250 million and $1 billion, I'm your guy. If you're worth less than $250 million, I'm probably expensive for you.
And family offices, typically, that's a very, very small family office. A family office, for those of you guys that don't know, is a founder or a company that's exited, and they have now over $100 million is the average of assets, that instead of having a financial wealth manager manage 120 clients, your job is to manage my wealth on my behalf. Well, family offices, there's 53,000 of them in the world. The average amount of assets that a family office has is $1 billion plus, which is the reason why we're building community at Venture House for family offices. We're actually founding a family office community here in Las Vegas and in Miami to build those relationships with that Rolodex, and it's the reason why we dreamed up this ridiculous F1 project that we're doing during F1. We're throwing a family office event. We've rented the most expensive, most exclusive, best view of the entire race in order to build that relationship with these family offices. There will be $150 billion in the room during that time.
So we purposely target 250 to $1 billion because over $1 billion, they have a lawyer, an accountant, a due diligence team, underwriting group inside of an office, like physical employees. Under 250 million probably doesn't justify hiring me because usually alternative speculative capital investing is about 10% of their total budget. It's about 25 million. They would need to spend money paying us. So it's that target, 250 to $1 billion, where I really fit. So imagine, folks, imagine that Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., half of my scheduled time in those 6 hours is meeting with investors and hearing their feedback on deals. So I hear a lot of stuff every day, every week. I hear the feedback, I hear why they did or why they didn't invest into a deal. Right? So at the end of the day, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give all of you 20 seconds apiece. And you're going to ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. And if you don't want or don't have a question, then just say pass. Cool?
Yes.
This way we can get a really good feel for what kind of questions you might have for me, and I'm glad to answer them. And I'm usually pretty quick on my feet, so I'm going to just start right over here at the top, left, and go all the way around. Ready?
Quickly.
Question or comment?
What are the worst types of people that you hate investing in?
Worst? What'd you say?
The worst type of people or
Uncoachable with a big attitude. Sir?
I'm in application development software. Whatever you describe, like basically your 4 categories, your over 300 per year parameter, that takes that to a pseudo algorithm of an application. Do you guys have an application? And then are you planning to actually automate this so your evaluation gets easier?
I'm going to answer your question. Yes, I've been planning the automation for 3 years. We have a full-on CTO and an automation team in Dallas, and the automation of our software is our focus right now. I'll answer your other question privately later, so I can move on. Sir? Pass. Sammy, come on.
How does someone under 925 get to 925?
We coach them, help them. That's exactly what my whole business model is all about. We charge by the hour and we help them get to 925. If I don't think they're going to get to 925, we tell them the minute we think there's a no-go. We call those deal killers. So if there's a deal killer in there, I'll let them know right away. Sir?
I heard you speak about the app. What's the name of the app that you were talking about?
Man, when that door opens, I can't hear.
CAPIZATE, Capizate.
Capizate. Yeah, we actually are in the middle of acquiring a new brand. Like, it's an amazing brand. It's a brand I helped develop 15 years ago, and it's amazing. I can't talk about it. It's a publicly traded deal, but it's really cool. Next. Pass. Sir. Pass.
What's the name of your book and where do we get it?
Get my card, and I'll just shoot it to you. I'll send it to you digitally. Sir.
what are deal killers?
Deal killers. There's three. As I said, there's 334 puzzle pieces. There's 21 of them in there that if that doesn't do well, it's just not a doable deal. Right. An example would be that we found fraud on the CEO, and they're trying to do a deal with the SEC. It just won't happen. And that happens a lot. We uncover stuff, and we're like, hey, the president of the company that owns 25% of the company went to jail for 3 years. How did no one know that? That's a deal killer.
Next.
I don't want to pass, but I can't think of
I'll come back to you. Pass.
Do you work with companies that are 40 years into their business and they're looking for more?
Absolutely, yeah. Hearing Z talk earlier, a lot of our work is M&A work. We do business valuations for M&As. We make strategies for M&As. You know, hearing Z's story earlier, I would make a list of the top 10 offices in Southern Nevada that have at least 10 people practicing. I would do all the due diligence on them, learn everything I could about them, and then take every one of them to the best, nicest dinner in town.
Absolutely.
And I would pitch each one of those 10 owners to say, you need me on your team. You've been in business 40 years. You have $1.5 million. Buy my company right now, and you're going to get this SaaS I created. Plus you get me. I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I'm talented, I'm amazing. I built an incredible business, but I want to be married and get kids. So bam, bring me on your team, give me $1.5 million, we have a deal.
But do the pitch where you pitch without them knowing that the pitch happened the 5 minutes right before. A really great founder knows how to pitch a 10-minute, 5-minute, 30-minute, whatever over the span of a 2.5-hour dinner, but it didn't feel like, oh, we just turned the pitch on, oh, we just turned the pitch off. Make it very, very natural, which means you have to really know your stuff.
So I would live in PitchBook if I'm you, if you know PitchBook, the software PitchBook. I would live on Crunchbase, Insight. I mean, there's a bunch of tools to use to find those top 10 owners, their name, their address, their phone number, the whole thing, find their secretary's name, call them up, invite them to an amazing dinner.
The founder of Crunchbase lives here.
Right? Cool? That's how I'd approach the M&A, the 40-year story. Even though you're 3 years, 4 years, 10 years.
3 going on 40.
10 years experience though.
How do you feel about franchises?
I think franchises are fine. I'm in the middle of developing 2 franchises right now. I mean, literally while I'm talking to you, I have 2 clients that we're helping franchise. I broke my teeth 25 years ago putting together a 19-store franchise for Denny's. I built, no kidding, I was the consultant and the finance guy that helped finance 14 Applebee's in Southern California. I have done Subway, I have done, Jesus, many. But now, in the last 15 years, we've literally launched 5 franchises from nothing to something. Yeah. Cool? Sir?
What is the best way to evaluate a pre-revenue company?
A pre-revenue company valuation typically has mostly to do with the pro forma, the forecast. If you can validate the numbers within the forecast and show how you came to it, references, citations, KPIs, all of the metrics within the industry, show all those and say, look, here's 5 comparisons of other companies that are similar to mine, not exactly, but this is what their 5-year numbers look like. That's called time series modeling, industry series modeling. And if you can write that up in a report, professional investors really love that, appreciate that, and they'll accept that because if you put together a pre-revenue company's valuation and say, look, here's some comps I found of real world companies with their numbers. Here's what my pro forma with a discounted cash flow net present value utilized from NYU, they put together the numbers there. There's what's called beta, risk sensitivity, all these different calculations, but ultimately it's called a discounted cash flow with net present value. And then take your forecast, put all those numbers together, write it up into a little report, and it basically says this company's worth X. Hope that answers your question. Ma'am.
If you were to assign one homework today, what would it be?
One what?
Homework for all of us, what would it be?
What is the biggest solution that you're trying to solve? And do you have all the parts and pieces in place to do that? Yeah. Sir?
I took my question, but I have another question.
Okay.
So, when you were 23, you decided to invest in a restaurant.
Yeah.
What made you decide to invest in an investment when you were doing something totally different?
When I was 12 years old, I was busing for my uncle. He owned the only 3 restaurants in the Catskills in New York. At 13, I was busing for him. At 14, let me became a waiter. He taught me how to cook and everything. So by the time I was 16, I was managing in the day, they called that Sizzler restaurants. I had the night shift at Sizzler. I was the guy in high school that had the new car and the new motorcycle and all the money because I was managing a restaurant at a very young age. Yeah. Ma'am, back to you.
Okay, 2 things. One, do you think that veteran service organizations, is that too saturated? Do you think that's very saturated?
Is what saturated?
Veteran service organizations.
Veteran services? Oh, never.
No.
Never. You got 20 years of Afghanistan war, Iraq war. It's never been more needed.
Most vets don't know what the options are, or they might feel that they're not properly supported. I'm not a veteran, he served, but we love supporting veterans.
In the history of U.S. military, going back to the 1600s, we've never had a bigger demand. We just finished a 20-year war. We've never had a 20-year war. Think about it. My war was 2 months. That war was 20 years. So millions of people are affected.
Yes.
Sir. Pass, sir.
How much does it cost for a founder to be involved, or for like Capizate? What's the Capizate cost?
Our initial retainer is only $1,000, right? We only charge $1,000 because I don't want to get in deep with a deal that's not worth doing for us or them. So we just do a $1,000 retainer. It took me many years to get to a $1,000 retainer, trying to figure out the right price. But you get a situation analysis, type of capital from us, a 6 to 9 page report for $1,000. From there, we try to figure out what you need, and then we'll give you a bid for work. Does that answer your question? Sir. Pass, sir. Pass.
I guess, what are the most important factors that you take into account when looking at like a business or modeling a business?
The leader, right? The leader. It comes down to the leader every time. As I described when I was talking about my score, though, the whole point of the score is that it's broken down into 5 sections, 25 subjects, 334 puzzle pieces, and that all has to come together. But if the leader sucks, the deal won't happen. And so the hardest part for our score, and what took more years out of that first decade than anything else, was how do you assess a leader on an objective way? So we had to go to, I spent $30,000 going to various seminars about people, culture, psychology, personalities. I bought every book you could think of. So inside, if you really know things like Think and Grow Rich, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, I mean, over and over, there's tons of books that you will actually read quotage right inside my book about how to analyze a leader. So if they're late to the first meeting, they're probably a deal killer right off the bat. If they're late 3 times, like Z told you earlier, no way in hell. Because how are they going to lead people? How can I trust them to talk to my investor community later? No way.
So there's this program that Tony and I have been long supporters of. We call it's called transformational training. We do some of our own privately. We've got one the 10th to the 12th in southern Utah in August. But there's nothing I've ever seen in my entire life. I read 120 books a year. I've been to every single freaking mastermind out there. I know all the entrepreneurs because I do funding, so they're calling me. They want me to come to their mastermind because I'm typically the only guy in the room that can help to decode how funding actually works. I have never seen anything as gangster or as challenging for founders to get through than transformational training. It's like Navy SEAL boot camp for the heart, mind, and soul. And if you are not ready to do the work, you will not make it through it. But I have never seen anything produce $1 million results within the same calendar year as that, because it's freaking hard. And so that's one thing that I'm glad that he's bringing up, because founders rarely look at themselves. They don't realize, what energy am I creating from? What place am I creating from? Am I believable? Because at the end of the day, I am the person that has to shoulder the issues of what's going on and get that ball across the line. And at the end of the day, I'm the last one to get paid. So founders don't look at themselves often enough. They say, oh, I understand self-help. Well, it's not what you know. It's the standard at which you live these principles that we all know that makes the difference between those that create, massive shifts and changes in industries, as well as, the financial outcomes that we get excited about.
Yeah, we, out of 1,000 points, because everything's weighted in our scoring system, the leadership section is 33% of the entire score. So if they're late paying their invoice, or give me 5 excuses why their credit card didn't clear, or they forgot about a meeting, or all these different things they do, we're tracking all of it, because it gives us indicators of what the reality of that person is. The program that he just defined to you, I have put 450 entrepreneurs through it. I've been to those seminars 30 plus times, meaning that I host events with 20 entrepreneurs in a room going through that ring of fire training he's talking about. It's phenomenal to see what happens. A lot of times companies are in trouble, they're distressed, there's all kinds of problems. I'll make them go through that training before I even talk to them, because I want to make sure they got their act together, their head clear, and they're ready to make true life decisions instead of just talking. Sir.
Holy smokes, how come you never told me it was cool? Jesus Christ, are you a cybernetic organism? Yeah, I mean, just bravo again on everything you guys have accomplished. You guys tracked the on something that hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by various different intelligence agencies, military, governments all around the world, corporations, VCs. So, congratulations on this phenomenal accomplishment.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Ma'am?
What's the question you would want to be asked in the room and the answer?
What do I need to do to get my company to be successful? Right? Because everyone wants money, right?
Or who do I get to become?
How do I get financed? I need money. I mean, that's what I hear every day of my life. But how do I become successful? That's a great question. Right? Sir?
Favorite pastime?
Ooh. On my website, there's a whole area called Trivia About Tony, and you'll see that I put answers about that. But I'm a nonprofit guy. I spend a lot of time in town doing things with nonprofits. I volunteer as a minister for the 24-hour church. I do a lot of really fun stuff. But the reality is that I'm a poker player, and I really like the thinking man's mind behind poker. And I like to read the other 8 people at the table and win because I read them. I like Z's thought mind. It's all about what's going on here. Doesn't matter what cards you have, what's going on the other 8 people. Cool? It's a pretty fun thing. The only challenge with it is, and the reason why I hesitated to even answer that, I don't have the time anymore. I used to really enjoy doing a tournament a week, couple live games a week. It's just timely. It takes too much time. Sir.
First of all, thanks for your service.
Thank you.
One of my past companies, Major General Doug Stone was my partner.
Very cool.
If you were in Afghanistan, I'm sure you ran SecCom and stuff. Have you applied your process to decentralized organizations yet? And what are the differences between, I come out of the equity world, I've had, between me and my 3 co-founders, 21 startups, 8 exits, over 100 million in the past 3 decades. My biggest thing was learning how to be a decentralized organization where nobody moves. There's no central power, there's no central decision. It's a community that
Understood.
makes that.
Yeah, so in our world, for investors to be able to track a deal, to be able to have the score updated on a continual basis, is all blockchain driven. I'm glad to have a conversation with you about it offline. Yeah. Sir.
Does the Alamo retainer give us a blueprint or a roadmap on how to get to 925?
It sure does. Yep. Z. How did I miss you? I'm awesome.
Oh, okay. Well, my background is in mathematics, and I recently...
You said mathematics?
Mathematics.
Okay.
And I decided to quit my job and start focusing on tutorials for children with special needs, especially autism and such.
So you and my daughter will get along great, by the way.
Okay.
She just got her master's degree to serve autistic children.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's my education background is really led me into this sector. What kind of advice would you give me in starting this, I guess, journey for helping children live with special needs?
Yeah, you need a situation analysis.
Single parents mainly with
No, I mean, you need a situation analysis.
Oh, okay.
That's my answer. I have to look at your entire package of things, your whole story, listen to you for an hour, interview you, ask you 11 questions, and give you a proper response. But since I missed you and all, I'll give you a free hour of my time, which is worth $250. So if you get my card, email me, you promise me an hour of your time, I'll give it to you.
Boom.
Somehow I missed you from the up and around, but I apologize.
Nice cat.
So because I missed you, you just got to win. Now we'll move to Z.
Yeah. So I can't help but notice, I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I did for 10 years, except you worked with raising capital, I worked with humans and marriages. And so what you're talking about of like the uh-ohs is like non-negotiables, and most people don't talk about that before they get married. That being said, the number one thing that I hold firm to my faith is building a business is spiritual. And so my question is, everything you do in due diligence sounds more like logic versus the intuition part.
Nope. So 40% of it is subjective and intuitive. 60% is objective. There has to be the human factor.
That's right.
Teaching people how to do the score on a non-subjective way is the hardest part of my business. Making my business replicable, scalable, automated, while keeping the real person subjectiveness within it is the single biggest challenge I deal with.
That's really interesting because as a psychotherapist for 10 years, we do subjective, objective analysis and plan. So it's the same thing. Thank you. You gave me a gift.
You're welcome. Sir.
So I'm working on Project 1000, which means I'm working on being a technology partner for 1,000 startups.
Yes.
Sounds like you talk to a lot of startups.
I do.
How can I help the lesser desirable, or the 925 plus too? But how can I be a resource for those that are trying along the way in a more structured way?
Very often in the section on technology, IP, where the stage of development of their technology is a real challenge. And they may score low in that area, which makes them not applicable to capital yet.
Yeah.
So sure, making those referrals to someone like yourself is what we do now. I just don't know you. I refer lots of people like you in my life, and I would be glad to add you to the list. We call you in my world a subject matter expert. We'd actually give you a contract, subject matter expert, refer you business.
Cool, thank you.
How's that sound?
That sounds absolutely fabulous. On a separate fine note, my grandfather served in Korea as a Marine, and he bought me my first computer in like '98.
We love your grandpa.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Sounds like it. Sir.
Kind of for both of you, talking about the transformational training.
Yeah.
Is there like a book that you would recommend people start with first?
Yes, the Samurai Warrior.
Samurai Warrior.
Or the 4 agreements.
What is that?
The 4 agreements. Every single founder I talk to, because they all ask for books from me, I always send them the 4 agreements. If they don't make it through that and say, wow, that was amazing, I know they're not for me. Because that book will kick your ass if you're paying attention.
There's hundreds of books on the subject, and definitely, but Samurai Warrior, Personality Plus, Personality Tree, there's just a ton. I could go on and on. If you're really interested, I'll send you a list.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Sir.
That was actually my question. My business partner stole it. So here's a question. For businesses, when you look at a business, does it kind of matter where their employees or staff are? Like, do you prefer like more geographical or one location?
Industry sector, subsector. It's a total issue of industry sector, subsector.
Okay.
So one thing I'll just say, guys, there's a big difference between reading a book about transformation, which very, very, very few books are transformational in my opinion. Although you could be in a context of your life where you read a book and it helps to produce transformation based on you being ready. But the beauty of a transformational training is you're experiencing it. Right. You feel it in a way that there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide. And if it doesn't sound scary, it is scary. That's the reason why it kicks so much ass.
There's 2 live events going on in August that I'm aware of, and just go to one of them. As he said, going live and participating in a class is 100 times more powerful than reading a book.
It's not for everybody, though. It's not. In fact, I try to talk most people out of going. Because if you know that you're supposed to be there, you will not be stopped. But you know, if you're not ready or not willing to do the work, you won't make it. People drop out all the time.
Okay. And what were those events? I'm sorry. What's
10th through 12th August.
There's 2. There's one here in Vegas and one in Southern Utah. We've got them both set up.
Okay.
We're happy to, whichever one fits your schedule, go.
Okay.
Pass. Here I thought as attentive as you'd been this whole time that you'd have a question. Interesting. Are you a business owner?
No.
Fair enough then.
I want to be a 925 PhD person.
Excellent. So July 24th, 25th, 26th, I'm certifying 15 new students, and you're more than welcome to participate.
Do I get your card?
Sure. Sir.
Yeah, have you ever worked with senior level entrepreneurial software engineers that don't have a thing, or only individuals who have an idea and a problem they're trying to solve?
Brother, I've sat in companies that are Fortune 500, 5,000 doing what I do. Yeah. I've worked with companies on M&As, transactions, right? Big companies buying little companies. So I've met a lot of people. Ma'am? Pass.
What's your average size company that you work with, and what's the smallest?
Sure. So in terms of averages, the average client's raising $3.3 million. The average client is pre-revenue, but post-proof of concept, right? So the average client is in growth stage. But I do meet with napkin, idea, right? Startup, pre-revenue, all the way through to, we've done a number of IPOs. Sir? Pass. Everyone, thank you very much.
All right, guys. Tony Drexel Smith, Capizate. We'll see you guys at the next session next month. We have a couple of events that are coming up. We have the next Venture House event, the next Built by Nevada event on the 2nd of August. You can get with any members of the team on getting an invite to that. You will want to sign up immediately because we do fill that up. And we have a bunch of online stuff. You guys are looking to pitch. We have every single week, me and the team, we probably see 300 pitches a week online. So there's different places you can plug in that either we're helping to facilitate or we're running it. There's a couple of things that I'll mention. Guys, figuring out your product market fit, doing a market analysis, go-to market. Some of these things need to happen before you're really truly ready to pitch actual real live capital to come into your company. Something else that we spend a lot of time on, and in my LinkedIn every single day I write about capital, is fundraising fluency. You're running around pitching people without a strategy or a plan or understanding the capital types. With the 4 major ones are public and gov funds, debt, equity, and revenue. But the thing is those go really, really deep once you start to break it down and get into all the options. So 2 terms you're going to want to understand. Capital stack. Capital stack is what are the different types of capital I'm stacking into my company at any given time. This is what we're working on automating here at CapTel. Number 2 is what is the capital sequence? It's the capital stack as time goes on. And what I mean by capital stack is that there's multiple types of capital that you should be looking to bring into your company at any given time. What are the public and gov funds options? What are the debt options? What are the equity options? And what are the revenue options I can bring into my company? And just in case you're not sure, Capital sponsorship, sponsor capital is a revenue capital type. It comes in the form of an investment. It feels, smells like the courtship is an investment, but it's not equity and it's not debt. It's coming into the company as revenue because there's no equity. People that give you a sponsored capital check, they're too big, too far into their careers to care about the equity and the interest in your company. They want the outcome that you can produce. We're talking about companies that sometimes have $100 billion a year in revenue. Do you think they're sweating whether or not they're going to get equity in your company? No, they're not. They want a shared outcome that you can produce. And if you're not clear on all this, go to my LinkedIn and start reading and subscribing to every single post that I write. You will not find anyone else talking about this stuff on the internet. I promise you that. This has been our entire obsession is where is the capital? How do we find it? How do we get aligned to it? How do we produce outcomes that these people want to stroke checks for? And they do it every single day. I was on the phone with a developer here in town and I told him Chipotle has a $50 million fund. General Mills has an $18 million fund for ladies. You know, it just goes on and on and on. There are tons of capital out there that you guys have never even heard of, and most people are chasing after this 3% of the available capital that's coming through the venture capital. And there's nothing wrong with VCs. We're great if you fit our business model. But you got to remember, a venture capitalist is raising money in a fund and has to return it in 10 years. Whereas somebody that's a founder funder doesn't have that constraint. Somebody that's a large corporate and a Fortune 2000 doesn't have that. So it's about understanding, how do I do the research so I can start having discovery conversations? I'm flying to Florida for the next 10 days to meet with all the founder funders. I'm meeting with the same people that we're relationshiping with here in the Nevada ecosystem. We're doing the same playbook down in Florida. I'm meeting with all the powers that be, the funding gods, the people that basically control influence and can conduit resources so that I can have all those resources to make available for founders, to create founder funders. That's our obsession. So if you guys want to learn how to be a founder funder, be paying attention to the content that I'm putting on my LinkedIn every single day. Because those are the people that are coming and interacting with that stuff, they're savvy to that message. They want that same thing. That's what they want to produce. So everything we do, whether we're building community, ecosystem, content, or related to funding, and I've been doing funding for 18 years. I've done almost every kind of funding out there except for IPO stuff, which is very late stage. I'll be doing lots of that as the time goes on. You guys have any quick questions before we break? Go get some lunch? Go ahead, Ed.
Where's the info on
August
August 2nd?
2nd, just get with me on my LinkedIn. We don't have the sign-up link just yet, but there'll be 150 entrepreneurs there at the Venture House properties. We own a series of 10-bedroom properties devoted to entrepreneurship, and we invite founders that have exited, VCs, all that. We have them fly in. They get hosted on property, and then you guys get to come join. We had 170 people last month come, and the quality is very high. City officials, da-da-da-da-da. Definitely a place that you want to be, and that's going to continue to be a network, and we're actually offering co-ownership opportunities for people if they're the right fit for 10 to 30% of the we own the properties currently.
I might have a two-part thing on the end.
Sure.
How did you get involved in this and start this?
In funding?
Yeah, in funding and the Vegas tech ecosystem.
So I'm the type of person that doesn't ask for permission. So many years ago, I realized that I felt that it was messed up that I could get a couple $1 million for a real estate project, but I couldn't get $100,000 for a startup. So what I did, kind of like what Tony did, is I went and said, how do I reverse engineer the underwriting for banks to get them to say yes to startups? And then I started stacking those banks. That became a capital stack so that a founder could end up with $100K into their business. Now this is debt, and debt has pros and cons, right? That's what gave me the eyes to see that this is happening at a higher level in Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. This capital sequencing thing, which is a term I made up, it's real. You can either understand it and rig it in your favor, or you can ignore it and play the game the hard way. I'm telling you guys, the capital game is beyond rigged. Beyond rigged. There's a phone call that a funder gets from another funder when they're about to fund a company, and they say, hey, look, I'm about to fund this company. I want you to do the exit in 3 years. These kinds of things happen all the time, where the outcome is produced. Every single funder, every time you sit down with a funder and they're about to do a deal with you, you need to be asking them, what's your plan to daisy chain me to the next capital source? Because no investor ever wants to be the last money into a deal, right? The ecosystem stuff came through. I went through transformational training in 2017. It completely shifted my entire life. And I realized that there was an intentionality around community building that I could take on. And I created a community. Bajal was one of the early individuals that got to come to that. And we did 400 events in 4 years, multiple cities. And so that developed a skill set that the team has around doing rapid deployment, guerrilla style community building, which is a skill set very few people have, which I strongly recommend you guys develop around your own businesses because it's a moat. It creates better customer lifetime value. It creates something. I'll tell you this, other people are building funding platforms. They will not out-community us. They will not. That's a superpower that we have. So in doing that, what I realized is I started tracking all the money to understand capital sequencing and sponsored capital. I started realizing that I could take my community building skills and that we could apply that to ecosystems. And what are all the moving parts that are necessary? I'm from Utah, so I know what a functioning ecosystem looks like. Most of the private equity groups out there are asking themselves, how is Utah producing so many exits? Because they're a third the age of these older markets, right? So that's where the ecosystem came from. Ecosystems are a grouping of smaller communities, essentially, that relate to each other. And so we went into a state where we didn't know a soul, and a year later we had every single check writer in our Rolodex. So then I'm like, okay, we're going to reproduce that in Nevada because this is the city I love in. This is the flag that I want to plant. And then now we're going to reproduce that in a few other states. And I'm in particular interested in the exodus states, the states that founders are moving to because they're about to exit, or they're deciding that New York and Illinois and California are oppressive places to build businesses. So they're like, we're going to move to Nevada, we're going to move to Texas, or we're going to move to Florida. So that's why Florida's on the list. And I believe that Miami and Vegas are very closely related symbiotically. So that's another part of the thing. I see the patterns because we've studied it. You start to get to a point where you get pattern recognition. Go for it.
So when looking at like getting capital for your businesses,
Yeah.
Do you see it to where like you're getting these real estate deals and for example scholarships? There's like a ton of unclaimed scholarships because people don't know that they can apply. Like, or do you find that with businesses where you're like, hey man, this is something that you can get. You just need to understand this, which is your underwriting. So you yourself have taken into account, like, I'm going to understand this underwriting for other businesses and give them money. Is that because there's there's an opportunity to make or get so much money out to people?
So the problem that most founders believe is true in fundraising. I do believe fundraising is broken for almost all founders, and it is broken for the great majority of most funders. But most founders would tell you that there is not enough capital. But you guys have to think about, there's trillions of dollars coursing through the economy, and if you go really study where all the money is, you realize there's trillions of dollars that's moving backdoor into startups every day. So the question is do you know where it is, how it works, and how to get aligned to it? Now in the future, what's happening between CapTel, Capizate, some of these companies that we're building, we will automate this process so that you don't have to understand it, you just get to experience it. We're not there yet. So that's the reason why I'm expressing it to you that, hey, if you want to go into a capital battle with one arm tied behind your back and you're blindfolded and you're just trying to like find some pennies on the ground, that's the way most founders are operating. But the reality is that there are groups out there that want to allocate capital. Capital never wants to sit because when it sits, it's not earning. Capital wants to be velocitized. That's when it makes money, right? But unfortunately, you've got the speed of innovation, which I think we're seeing how crazy it is, right, Bajal, with the AI and everything. But the speed at capital, as far as fundraising, is not moving at the same speed. So there's a bunch of pent-up dry powder and demand that's not moving as quickly as it wants to, right? And there's a lot of people, for the first time, they're saying, I want to become an angel investor. Or, I'm a real estate guy for 20 years. I want to get involved in more tech companies, right? So there's a lot more investment coming online. Crowdfunding is actually very young relative to where it's going to go. The market has responded and said, hey, look, if you're doing product crowdfunding, we believe in that. We're going to give money to that. But if you look at how equity crowdfunding is doing, it has not matured yet. It's just not to the point where it's at the highest level returning the same amount of money. Like, there just isn't as much interest in it yet, right, as an example. So we're going to see these things start to mature and become a bigger deal. We'll start seeing DAOs being used at a greater extent on blockchain to produce raises inside of a community configuration. Yep, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier, you said that we're in a funders environment.
Yep.
What is that? Could you give us just like a few do's and don'ts in that environment?
So the mistake that you could believe is that there are people not allocating capital. It's just the people that you're used to thinking are allocating. Not only were they always the minority, but they're not allocating as much because a lot of them are in trouble. So there's a bunch of funders that VCs that are now probably never going to be able to raise another fund because they were not successful with their last fund. They made really bad bets. The whole SVB bank thing should be something you're paying absolute attention to. Do's and don'ts, I would read my LinkedIn content. I talk about it from a funder's perspective, from a founder's perspective. I'm both. I've been both my entire life. And I'm now, again, building a funding platform to basically automate and streamline and simplify the fundraising process. So that's what I would recommend there. And then, when you have questions, you can ask them in real time on LinkedIn. Yep. Okay. Any last question? Go for it.
So, when you say the velocity, are you saying in a way where people aren't moving money because of technology? Like, is the technology allowing the person who's investing the money to see if it's a good business or not? Or is it just that they don't have the...
There is almost no technology for that. That's what Tony and I are building. There's very little market data insights and analytics for funders to make decisions based on. They think they have deal flow. They're like, hey man, I got lots of deal flow. They have lead flow. You can't know if it's a deal unless you do the due diligence on it. So what's happening is you've got a bunch of allocators where they've got a bunch of money and it's locked up because there's only so many hours in the day. Put yourself in the mind of somebody that's sitting on $1 billion. Do you think they want to spend their entire life looking at deals? Guys, a VC looks at 600 deals to make a decision to do 2 to 6 a year, maybe 12 if they're really lucky. So can you see how inefficient this process is? A founder goes and spends a year trying to raise money. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the narrative. They don't understand what the funders are looking for. They don't even know if they're a thesis match for the actual fund. So we have an incredibly ineffective, highly inefficient market situation, and that's part of the reason why founders and funders are not matching and getting paired quickly enough for it to be a much more efficient process. This should be taking 90 days, and it's taking a year.
So it sounds like you're doing the Bumble of the raising capital.
Sure, it's a lot more complicated than that, but yes. Yep.
So I'm not sure, but I heard like there are some like companies where they just send like term sheets of like how the business is actually doing and if the business is making money. Now, is it more so a sense that there are not enough businesses that are meeting those metrics of hey, making money and
no,
is it actually like hey, there are very good businesses out here that make money that we want to invest in?
What we have is we have an education problem for founders understanding how fundraising works. You've got funders that don't understand capital stacking or capital sequencing themselves. There's a lot of VCs that are better VCs than I've been that I could sit down with, and they don't understand where all this capital is. In fact, Tony and I have a much better idea of where the capital is hiding out, how it wants to move than most other funders. They know their capital type. I was just on the phone with a government yesterday, a city, a very large city, bigger than Vegas, and I was blowing their mind with where all the capital is. So it's a lot of it is a lack of education, and then honestly, there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on. There's people that they're not really allowing capital to move, and they don't want to be disintermediated. That's a fancy word for saying people in the middle that are not being efficient are going to get removed from the system. This is part of what blockchain actually does, is it disintermediates the in-betweens. So at some point, Uber isn't going to be able to function because you're going to have drivers getting set up with riders directly without a third party in the middle, right? Now, I'm not attacking the Uber business model because it has birthed in and of itself other billion-dollar companies. I go to South America a lot. I was sitting in a car and I was thinking to myself, this is pretty freaking cool that an American multi-billion-dollar company birthed and it wasn't just Uber, there's Lyft, a bunch of other companies obviously that came before. But this is how cool this founder-funder thing is that it spurs on competition, opportunity, whatever, where these other companies end up getting birthed out of thin air into reality, right? All right, guys, we got a break. We'll see you over at lunch. Talk to you guys soon.